Welcome back to Before You Vote. Joining me is the Executive Director from Clean Elections, Tom Collins. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be here.
I've been here for 30 years. I don't think I've ever seen this many ballot initiatives on one ballot. Is this the biggest we've ever seen?
This is the biggest since 2006. And 2006 was 19. We're at about, when you add in local, we're getting up to 15, 16.
Yeah, so I don't remember that in 06, but this one is huge. So I want to go through some of these so voters understand what a yes or a no vote on some of the big ones. We're never going to get to all of them.
Sure.
Let's start with 139,
Sure.
The initiative that everybody's talking about with rights to abortion in Arizona.
Sure.
Can you explain what a yes or no vote means on this?
Sure. So what a yes vote would do is enshrine a right to abortion in the state constitution. What that means practically is that the legislature can't take it away. It creates a new law that says through the point of viability, the legislature can't really regulate the area unless it's to protect the health of the patient, and meets a number of other criteria, and it has to be the least restrictive means, right? So that's what that says, and that's what's the main bulk of what's going to be enshrined.
Yeah, and so what I like about, and I should have prefaced with this, is that you are not here to advocate for or against anything, but it's your job to make sure it's defined and described clearly.
We try to make sure that when folks go to our website, like when they go to other government websites, that they can get information about what's on their ballot. That's fair to give them.
So Prop 314,
Sure.
the initiative that everybody's talking about when it comes to the border, can you describe what that is? Because there's more than just one phase in this, or one thing in it.
Yeah, so Prop 314 basically says a couple of things. It says if you enter Arizona, unlawfully, not through a port of entry, right? You've committed a crime. It also says that if you've been ordered by a court to leave, by a state court to leave, you've got to, and if you don't, that's another crime. It also creates a couple new crimes around if you were here and you're undocumented, you lied to get employment, or you lied to get public benefits. Those are crimes, and then it also enhances penalties for fentanyl. If you are distributing fentanyl and it leads to a death, it will create an enhanced penalty there.
Are there penalties in there for employers that hire people? Is there anything addressed in that there?
This law is really focused on the person who's there.
The border crosser.
Yeah, and it basically says that person is going to end up, if they're arrested or convicted, is going to end up with some kind of term in jail or prison. And then ultimately the idea would be that the person would get, would leave.
So 133 and 140 both deal with primaries, but kind of cancel each other out.
Right.
Am I right about that?
Yeah. So 140 is what goes by Make Elections Fair, if you see the signs. And 140 does a couple of different things, but one of the main things it does is it creates an open primary. What that means is regardless of party, everybody has to get the same number of signatures to get on the ballot, and everybody gets treated equally on that primary ballot, right? 133, which was put on by the legislature, says not for partisan offices, we want to have partisan primaries, and the party that wins that partisan, the candidate of the party, they get on the general election ballot. So yeah, that's exactly right. They're opposites of one another.
Because I know that in 140 it doesn't pick it makes the legislature decide how many people get on the general election ballot and all those things.
That's right.
But in theory, you could have 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans or one of each, depending on who gets the votes.
Yeah.
And that's what 133 is saying. We're going to keep it the way it is, that it's a partisan election, top vote getter in a party.
That's exactly right.
So if somebody goes in confused on this, and they look at 133 and say, oh, that's a good idea,
right,
and they vote yes, and then they get to 140, and they say, I think that's a good idea, and I vote yes, I've just canceled out my own vote.
Right. Well, technically what you created is a situation where if both pass, the highest vote getter, if there's a conflict, the courts will have to figure out which lasts. But on the primary piece, which is just that piece, those two are diametrically opposed.
All right, what about 134, proposed amendment relating to initiatives and referenda?
Right, so what this says is right now, if you want to put an initiative on the ballot, you need to collect a certain percentage of qualified voters' signatures. You can do that in any part of the state, but you can come to Maricopa or Pima County. The legislature says, you know what, we want to have it distributed, so it would require you to get that percentage from every single legislative district.
Yeah, it seems a little in the weeds, but again, another one that's really important. What about 312 and property taxes? Why are we voting about property taxes?
Right. So what this says is if you can show that a city or county is not taking care of public nuisances, vagrancy, drunkenness, that kind of thing, and that's costing you money as you're a property owner, you can apply to the Department of Revenue for a rebate on your property taxes, and that comes out of the city's revenue.
Is there a court? Do you have to go to court for it, or is that mandated in this proposal?
Yeah, it's really an application through the DOR with your taxes.
All right, so let's take a look at the judicial retention.
Sure.
Can you explain what this and what is that? Is 137? I think.
Sure, absolutely. So in Arizona, since for the last 30, 40 years, we've had what's called judicial retention for appellate courts, Supreme Court, and the bigger county superior courts. And what that means is those judges go through merit selection, they get screened by a panel, and then they get appointed by the governor, and then they stand for retention every 4 or 6 years. At the back of your ballot, you're going to see 40 or 50 names of judges. Those judges are the judges up for retention. Now, in the last couple of years, there have been some judges who've been unretained. There's been a lot more political attention to that. And the folks who put Prop 137 in front of you are saying, that means we're getting too political. Retention and merit selection was designed to make our judiciary less political, because prior to that, we actually just elected judges on an RD ballot, right?
Correct.
We want to get rid of that. They want to secure that. The opponents, on the other hand, are saying, really what you're doing is you're taking away an accountability from the judges and the justices. You're taking away the ability of the voters to have a say in who continues to be on the bench.
All right, so as you can see, these are so important because your vote is going to make big changes in some areas if you vote yes or no on a lot of these. So we've got more to go over with this, some of the important initiatives that are on the ballot. We have another segment to do this in, so please stay where you are. Welcome back to Before You Vote. In the middle of our conversation about ballot initiatives with the Executive Director of Clean Elections, let's go to 138, because 138 has to do with tipped workers and minimum wage.
Yeah.
What does this mean if you vote yes or no?
Sure. So what this is going to do is two things. First, it's going to put the way we handle tipped workers into the Arizona Constitution. So that will mean the legislature can't change that around, and it'll also make it harder for the voters to change that around as they have with minimum wage and stuff like that. The other thing it does is it says that the employer can take 25% off from the minimum wage of the tipped worker, provided that over the pay period they end up at $2 better than minimum wage. So if the minimum wage is $10, they get to knock it down to $7.50, provided over the pay period you get to $12.
With the taxable tips.
Yes, that's right.
And so that initiative seems confusing at first glance, and depending on who you talk to in the industry, but it's something that's important because it's going to be enshrined about wages in Arizona, and it's going to be tough to change.
Yes.
All right, let's go to 311. It deals with first responders.
Sure. So what this says is that, first responders are obviously putting their lives at risk, and the legislature has passed this to the voters that says there's going to be a $250,000 death benefit to a spouse or child of a first responder who's killed in the line of duty, and it's going to be paid for by a $20 fee on people who have criminal convictions. And then if there's extra money, that money goes into police training and other law enforcement type of programs. So
anybody then, it would be affecting people that are convicted of crimes that when they're paying their restitution and fines, part of it will have a $20 surcharge, so to speak, that would go to this fund.
Yeah. The other thing it does is it enhances the penalties for an aggravated assault on a first responder. So if you simple aggravated assault where you know the person's a first responder, that gets moved from a Class 5 to a Class 4 felony, and if it causes an injury, it moves from a Class 4 to a Class 3 felony.
All right, so Prop 135, which deals with emergency powers in the governor, where did this come from, and what does it do?
So anybody might recall during the height of COVID, Governor Ducey and governors and mayors across the country took actions to try to, stop the spread. We all kind of remember that, right? And there was a lot of pushback about that. There was litigation, business owners saying, hey, I'm trying to make a living here, workers saying, I got to make a living here. And so the legislature, in reviewing that, says, you know what, we ought to have a review on this. So after 30 days, unless it's a wartime thing or a flood or a fire, right, we ought to have after 30 days it should expire unless we re-up it as the legislature.
So it's almost like war powers to a president.
That's a good analogy, yes.
Yeah, so it limits that, it makes sure that and I want to be pro or con on it, but it is it is saying that the governor has the ability to move quickly.
Yeah.
But after 30 days, the legislature then has to act on the continuation.
That's correct.
Okay, that's a great explanation. All right, let's talk about 313, which is sentencing for sex trafficking, child sex trafficking.
Right. So child sex trafficking is really every aspect of that you can think of. It's the financing, the transportation, all that stuff. And what this does is currently under law, the sentences around that, which are pretty severe, but they're imposed based on the age, the circumstances, those kind of things. This says a natural life sentence if you're convicted of child sex trafficking, period.
So it is a minimum mandatory.
That's right.
No way you're getting out.
Right, that's right.
All right, so the voters are going to have their say. I want to talk about a couple of the really what people would consider kind of in the weeds, wonky ones,
Sure,
but
sure.
everybody's still got to vote and has to understand. Let's talk about 136,
Right.
where it comes to the legislature and ballot measures.
Right. So this
this is your wheelhouse.
Right. So this is very interesting, right? So in Arizona right now, you'll see if you read the paper or you listen to your show or watch your show, people litigate about these ballot measures. This one says we're going to not just litigate the signatures and all that stuff. We're going to litigate whether or not the measure itself is constitutional. Current law in Arizona is you don't do that unless it passes. This would say no, you get to do that up front when the measure gets submitted. People can go to court and challenge its constitutionality before people even vote on it. And the argument sort of against it is, hey, that's going to bog us down. We're not going to get good opinions. And why should we do this if we don't even know if it's going to pass? The argument on the other side is, we're going to spend a lot of money and people's time on this. We ought to know if it's constitutional up front.
And so, yeah, I think that when you read it initially, my eyes kind of,
Yeah.
but you work in this world,
Yeah.
this is a decision that's a very important decision.
This would affect the way that folks both bring initiatives and try to argue about them for sure.
So it's one that people need to really do their homework on.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about 315, which is rulemaking. Now,
Yeah.
I looked at this again, and I thought you're the perfect guy to talk to about it.
Well, I don't know how to take that, but
Because you're in this world every day.
I know. So anyway, so this one is kind of interesting. What it says is if agencies pass regulations all the time. The legislature says, you agency, you get to you're the experts. You pass the rules on how we're going to have hospitals regulated or ambulances regulated, all that kind of stuff. This says if your regulation costs more than $500,000 to implement over 5 years, the legislature is going to have to ratify that before that rule can take effect. So the pro argument is the legislature, not the agencies, are elected, and the legislature, not the agencies, should be the final word. The con argument is you have these agencies that are in the nitty-gritty day-to-day. They're working with the stakeholders. They understand the situation, and they're going to be working to promote public health and safety, and this is going to be an impediment.
And and it's also bureaucracy.
That's right.
That's the argument against.
That's right.
Voters that vote early are going to have more time,
Yes.
cup of coffee.
Right.
But if you go to the polls, you got 4 pages to look at.
Yeah.
Where do voters go
Yeah.
to, outside of this conversation, where do they go to get the information on the initiatives they're going to vote on?
So there's a couple of different places. They can always go to the Clean Elections website, azcleanelections.gov. We've got information on your candidates, how to vote, and ballot measures. We're even featuring this year. We have a few debates on some of the high-profile issues that are on the ballot. Obviously, you can also go to the Secretary's website, azsos.gov. There you can find that publicity pamphlet in electronic form, and they do town halls where folks are there from their staff, and people who are pro and con on these initiatives are out there talking to folks.
Listen, this is so important, and we kind of raced through these to get through all of them, and I'm glad that we did because it's such an important election cycle, as they all are, but it's rare that we have this many decisions being made by the voters.
Absolutely.
I appreciate the time and your hard work at Clean Elections, and thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right, you be an informed voter, be an educated voter, and this is just one step in that process. You've got a lot of important decisions to make. Make sure you make the ones that are right for you in an educated way. We'll be back.